Good afternoon. You're watching Business World Live here on One News. I'm Jess De Los Santos. Let's take a look at how the local bourse closed today, Thursday. Okay, the benchmark corrected after the huge sell-off on Wednesday over Omicron worries. The main index is higher today by 1.25%, snapping a four-day losing streak. Local shares back to the 7,000 level, 7,032 to be exact. Pretty much what Manny Ocampo was expecting. The managing director of the Investment and Capital Corporations of the Philippines said, should there be a reversal again, it's all going to boil down to the Omicron variant. Now, so far, authorities are monitoring 64 individuals who flew into the country from red list countries, including three expats and a Filipino who went to Negros Occidentales after arriving from South Africa. But Omicron aside, Ocampo says fundamentals are still good. Inflation is expected to be below 4%. GDP for the fourth quarter also projected to come out strong. BSP Governor Ben Jokno likewise unconcerned over the new variant. He says the Philippines will continue to have an accommodative policy setting as long as needed. Lots of blue chips making gains today, recovering from that Wednesday retreat. AC Energy is a day's best performer, up by 6.3%. Aboitiz equity also in the green, increasing 3.7% to 50 pesos and 30 centavos a piece. This after its energy unit, Aboitiz Power, said that it will list 12 billion pesos worth of 2025 and 2028 bonds on PDEX. Globe also ended the day on the upside, as well as PLDT, after both stocks were raised to outperform at Credit Suisse. Lastly, we already talked about this yesterday, but this time you have Union Bank confirming that it is indeed in talks with Citigroup to acquire its Philippine assets. Discussions, however, are still at the preliminary stages, and that there are no assurances here that the transaction will be completed. Recall that sources told Bloomberg that Union Bank is Citi's preferred bidder for its local assets. Union Bank, looking at this chart right here, soared today on the back of that news, higher by 6.4% to 111 apiece. Here are other headlines we're keeping our eyes on. The National Task Force Against COVID-19 is recommending the extension of the national vaccine drive until Friday, December 3, to maintain the event's momentum. Galvez says this extension was also requested by their regional counterparts in Visayas and Mindanao. The Health Department reports that a total of around 7.6 million have been inoculated in the three-day drive. 86% received their first doses. Top performing regions are Calabarzon, Central Luzon, and Central Visayas. Another round of vaccinations will be done on December 15 to 17. Meanwhile, the health department has announced that all fully vaccinated adults will be eligible for the booster shot starting tomorrow. The DOH says the National Vaccination Operations Center will issue operational guidelines on its implementation. The finance department warns the next administration that it may face fiscal concerns at the start of its term, as economic growth may be stunted by reforms like the Mandanas ruling. Under this Supreme Court ruling, local government units will get a bigger share in national tax collections alongside the transfer of basic services starting 2022. Based on DOF estimates rather, the Mandanas ruling will slash the government spending efficiency and could lead to a 3% lower economic growth. According to Secretary Sonny Dominguez, this is because local governments are two times less efficient in spending compared with national agencies. The budget department says the local governments will receive a total of 959 billion pesos in 2022. Aside from the Mandanas ruling, Dominguez says the next admin's economic team must also address tax revenue losses from the pandemic-induced slump, the rise in debt to fund COVID-19 response, and the looming revenue impact of our economic recovery measures. And manufacturing activity rose to an 8-month high in November as new orders increased for the first time since March. The Philippines manufacturing PMI rose to 51.7 last month from 51 in October, the highest since the 52.2 print in March. IHS market economist Shreya Patel says this improvement signals a recovery in the country's operating conditions. That's on the back of new orders jumping for the first time since March, thanks to higher client numbers, rising footfall, and improved customer demand. A reading above 50 indicates improving conditions for the manufacturing sector versus the previous month, and a reading below the threshold means deterioration. The Omicron variant still sending shivers to economies around the world, despite the WHO insisting that nations should reevaluate and temper its curves. But what might this mean for an economy that's just beginning to mend like the Philippines? Let's get insights from Chris Nelson, the Executive Director of the British Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines. Good afternoon, Chris.
Good afternoon, Jess. How are you?
Doing great. I hope you're doing fine. Well, again, big news of the day, still Omicron variant. It's possible entry again, no longer a question of if, but when. Once it comes to that, how's that going to affect the way we do business, especially with members of the chamber?
Well, look, I mean, Omicron is obviously very new everywhere. I mean, if I take the UK's approach, I mean, currently there's only 11 cases. And the UK's advice is obviously not to panic. They've obviously reinforced and brought back masks, which has never gone away in the Philippines. So we've kept that mask operational. They're bringing that back in the UK. They're also bringing back certain things in terms of transportation. So I think the way you've got to look at Omicron at the moment is to be cautious. Obviously, we're getting reports out of South Africa. And I guess the question going forward is to manage it. And I have to say that as the chamber, we've obviously supported very much the current approach, which is the granular lockdowns, which obviously then prevents an overall lockdown. So I think in the case of the Philippines, we're in a good position. It's a question of remaining cautious, but obviously approaching it as they have been doing the IATF with granulated lockdowns, if that occurs.
So do you take it to mean as well that at least for the local economy, it's not going to be much of a concern compared to what we had back when Delta was at its peak here in the country?
Yes, I think so. And I think also you've got to look at the way, obviously, I mean, we're now, this is, it started March 2020. So we've obviously seen a lot of developments. And I think also one has to be fair, both the government and the local government units have obviously refined their policy. Plus, of course, as you've said in your earlier report, vaccination rates have gone up significantly, particularly in Metro Manila. And I think the vaccine, certainly in the case of Delta, certainly from its own indications, certainly has an effectiveness. So I think, obviously, there's a drive now. We support that. AstraZeneca, which is one of our major companies in the British Chamber, was one of the key donators. So I think that combination gives us confidence we can move forward.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the industries expected to be heavily battered, at least should there be surges due to the Omicron variant, is the travel and tourism industry. How's the variant going to further hamper, or how is it going to hamper the recovery of the sector?
Well, obviously, I mean, if you look at what the Philippines has been doing, and we've been a supporter of that, is to try and encourage more travel. I mean, travel is not obviously just on tourism, it's also business people and investments, and clearly that's one of our key aims. And obviously the government improved the policy on the green and the yellow list, which I think was, for the yellow is 3 days. Now they've combined it back to 3 days. They were looking at international tourism. I still think there's opportunities there. Clearly, local tourism is obviously continuing to grow, and we're supporting the sector. So I think the question of doing this, Jess, is it going to be a very cautious, but the approach they're taking has been very well validated. I think the quarantine plan they've got in place, which is the 3 days for the yellow and green, and obviously, hopefully, that can go back to the green list, which is obviously for fully vaccinated people. And I think if you look at the hospitality sector, and of course in the restaurant sector, we're seeing some now recovery. And the way forward, as I said, is to what the government's doing is to go away from having the overall lockdowns, but to being very specific and therefore to keep the economy moving forward.
Okay, now, of course, authorities have been saying, well, there's no clear data yet as to how the Omicron variant is going to affect the efficacy of vaccines. We should just keep on inoculating the population. And on that note, you have the UK completing the donation of at least 5.2 million AstraZeneca doses to the country. Should we be expecting more donations?
Look, I think the UK and many, so I think also that's through the WH program as well. I think the UK and I think other countries involved. And I think it's a recognition across the world, actually, that there's a need to vaccinate, dare I say, everyone. I mean, I think it's been put very well that we're all safe when everybody is safe, right? So I think there is that. I mean, this is the 75th year of diplomatic relations between the UK and the Philippines. We have a new ambassador in place, Ambassador Law Bofis, and the relationship is very strong. And I think that started before. And I think, yes, I mean, obviously the Philippines is very supportive, not just obviously on the vaccines, but also in terms of economic cooperation and support in general.
Mm-hmm. Now, in terms of the economic agenda of the national government, you have the chamber really pushing hard for certain economic measures, such as the Retail Trade Liberalization Act. We are expecting, of course, Congress to go on a holiday break. How confident are you that these priority bills will be passed before Duterte ends his term?
Well, in the first case, if you take the Retail Trade Liberalization Act, that's already been passed through the bicameral. It's been signed as an enrolled bill. It's with the Office of the President since the 10th of December. 10th of November, let me correct that, apologies. However, therefore, we're anticipating that will be signed or go into law very shortly. So the Retail Trade Liberalization Act, that'll be a very key measure in that sector. We believe there were discussions today in the Foreign Investment Act in the bicameral, so we have confidence there. And we'd also like to see the Public Service Act. Now, if we get all those, and I think this is a very important point, Jess, because it will be a clear signal to investors and obviously lead to even further foreign direct investment. So am I confident? Yes, I'm confident on the Retail Trade Act. I'm confident for the Foreign Investment Act. Obviously, the Public Service Act, in terms of its timing, is behind, but we're still hopeful. And I think the key for the Philippines is that if we get all those acts passed, we can further reinforce it to UK companies who've already expressed an interest. And that will certainly assist the economic recovery of the country, which obviously was featured in the earlier part of the program.
Okay, but pending those measures, what's the level of interest now among UK companies to invest in the Philippines? How many firms are looking to set up shop in the country in 2022?
Well, what I can say is this, actually. So during 2020 and 21, which obviously we've all been living in this pandemic, we've still had significant interest, particularly in our key sectors of retail, food and drink, beverage, advanced machinery, business outsourcing. So I think there's great opportunities. I would certainly say those companies are looking forward to seeing these signals of these acts passing. And I think the other thing I want to stress here is that we have been a great advocate and are an advocate to UK companies to see the Philippines not only as in itself a great market, but as an entry to all of Southeast Asia. So interest is high. And I think I'd just like to, again, urge, obviously, the people in Congress, the Senate, get those bills passed as well, and because I think it will send a great signal. It was one of the points we reinforced last Friday at the Department of Finance and BSV Forum. So interest is high. It'll be further supported with those measures.
But can we at least get a number? Like, do you have at least certain firms now already at least concluding or trying to complete requirements on the possibility of investing here in the Philippines next year?
I think so. I mean, look, over time, we've done a lot of inquiries. I mean, I think this year alone, we've been handling probably in the region of inquiries, whether that'll lead to business is something else. But I would say we've had at least over 30 plus. And I think the way forward is not only, of course, people investing, finding partners here. We've done work on that respect. And of course, we do a lot of work in terms of promoting and educating and working with it. So I'd say, Jess, interest is high, opportunities are there. And really, I think the key for the Philippines is to go forward in this pandemic. As I said, I can't reiterate it enough that these measures will be important in that. And I think it'll be not just helpful, but critical in the economic recovery.
All right. Speaking of economic recovery, you just have to ask you this: when do you see at least the Philippines returning to its pre-pandemic level of growth?
Well, there's been variations on that. I think we're looking probably, I've seen different indications, but probably towards the latter half of 2022, coming in 23. I think what's important, of course, in that is there's certain dynamics the Philippines can't control, obviously world events, supplies and so forth. But I think linked to that is obviously the Build program. I would commend that the way we've moved forward now in terms of the managing the risk, going to granulated lockdowns. I mean, I would just commend the work we've done also and supported Joey Concepcion, who has now been given the Lifetime Arrancada Award. I think also keeping in the way the Banco Central has operated and supported, and of course, the Department of Finance through its actions. So I think there's good opportunities towards obviously the latter part of 2022 and getting back to the recovery and the growth rate that we all enjoy, which is obviously 6.5 plus.
All right, the second half of 2022. Of course, we're all hoping for the same or even earlier, if possible. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon, Chris Nelson, Executive Director of the British Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines. Thank you, Chris. Stay safe.
Great pleasure, Jess, and thank you to all your viewers as well. Have a good day.
And those are the biggest stories this trading day, December 2, 2021. Catch Businessworld live again tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. for the market open and 3:15 p.m. for the market close. I'm Jess De Los Santos. We are One News. Mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines.